So fear. Um, so it's important to, I think, understand that fear in and of itself is something that exists in a human being because it's helpful in some way. You know, it's needed. We need that emotion, and it has actually become a bit of a cliche these days. I've heard a lot of people repeat the little cliche about, oh, you know, fight or flight. Um, oh, you know, when you're in fear, you're just projecting into the future, and when you're thinking about the past, you're just thinking about stuff that, you know, is no longer in the present moment, and all we've ever got is the present moment. And so it's like, yeah, it's great. It's great that everyone is getting onto that, and that is indeed true. Um, but really understanding that, you know, about fear, you can't just be so blanket coverage with what you're saying, which is, oh, you know, there's no such thing as fear. It's all projection. It's not in the present moment. Fear is a real thing and has got a real purpose, and has helped obviously humans for millions of years, in times of danger. So what happens when we are fearful or when we're scared? So it's I think it's helpful to remind ourselves that it's actually a bodily sensation as much as it is, you know, an emotion that we feel and thoughts that we have. It's the same as most human activity. You know, it's on them three levels. So when we're feeling fearful, the body starts to release chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol. I'm sure lots of people know all this already. And you know, they're pumped to the muscles so that the body is primed for action to be able to run away from whatever the threat is. Now obviously that's a process that's been honed over millions of years of evolution, where we actually needed to run away from things quite a bit. So, you know, it's like we've conditioned the human being to have that response to something that we need to run away from. So that's, you know, that's still with us. That mechanism is still with us. But these days, you know, there's a lot less things that we need to be running away from, at least physically. The things that we get fearful of mentally, well, the bodily processes that accompany that mental fear or that projection into what might harm us are no longer necessary. They're not, you know, we don't need adrenaline pumped to the muscles to be able to run away from something we're thinking about. But the reason why it's important is when the body is pumped full of those chemicals and it's priming itself for running away from a threat, it's actually switching on what's called the sympathetic nervous system. So it enables you to detect threat, and what the accompanying thought process that helps with that is you start thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead in terms of what might happen, so that you can detect it, so that you can prepare. Now, obviously, I hope people can see the similar, you know, how that's playing out here. Everyone's thinking, oh, what if that? What if that? What if that? What if that? You know, so I mean, if it wasn't such a serious thing, in some cases, it's actually quite funny that lots of people are actually making actions based on lots of virtual mental phenomena that's not actually happening. It's not actually here yet. And so, you know, you can see the disparity between what's real and what's not, and why it's not necessarily a good thing to be panicking in this situation, why the fear and the panic isn't helping. So okay, let's say everybody understands that or gets that. I mean, there may be some people that go, no, you know, we need to do that. But I mean, we'll address that another time. But let's just say, for example, everyone goes, okay, I understand. There's no reason to fear and panic and act in that way, but I can't help it. I can't help feeling like that. and you know, even though I know it's not good to panic, I'm still suffering from the emotional state that panic gives me, and I'm still acting from that. Well, you know what's happening there is, you know, you're caught in a cycle, a loop of panic, because as I said before, when you're in the panic and fearful state, the sympathetic nervous system is switched on. That's good because it allows you to detect threats, but the downside is it makes you, and it thinks it's doing this with good reason, it makes you really sensitive to any bit of phenomena, and it kicks the sympathetic nervous system again into action, creates more adrenaline, gets the heart racing. So it's like when you're already in that state, it's hard to get out of it, because things that you otherwise wouldn't be fearful of or wouldn't panic about, you will do, because your body's switched on to be more sensitive, to suspect everything around you as a possible danger, so that you can then free yourself from that danger. And so you get into this cycle of behaving and thinking and feeling. You know, the anxious thought or the fearful thought kicks off the sympathetic nervous system. It kicks off all these chemicals in the body, kicks off this whole way of being, and then that way of being latches onto anything else and derives more fear and more panic from that. So, you know, you've got a loop going on that's pretty difficult to get out of. So thankfully, as well as the sympathetic nervous system, the body's also got another nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's the one that comes into action to relax us and calm us down. And that system is essentially at play when we're feeling calm and not worried and not fearful. But in the midst of an epidemic like this, it's really, really hard to get out of that cycle and get into the parasympathetic nervous system, if I can say it properly, because we're constantly clanging our inner fear mechanism. It's like a tuning fork. It's like a fearful thought or an anxious thought, like clangs the tuning fork, which reverberates, and that's all the energy and the adrenaline. And it's like every time you have another thought, it clangs it again and clangs it again, and it's just like a continual reverberation. This, like, you know, this energetic response is just like permanently being blitzed and permanently being turned on. And there's no time for the tuning fork and the vibrations of it to settle into silence and stillness, because before it does, there's something else that makes us fearful again and makes us panic and sets it off again. So it's this like continual chain. And so the things that are doing that, which we can speak about a lot in another time, is reading social media and absorbing everyone else's fear, and listening or reading the news, because those things are reported in an urgent way. There's a sense of urgency, and it's like you've got to be careful. And you know, those things are not doing, well, they're doing more harm than good. But aside from that, back to this, getting into the parasympathetic nervous system. How do we like turn off the fear response and allow that sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system to come into play? Well, I'll talk about that in another video, I think, because we've been going for over 10 minutes now, and so I think I'm going to leave it there and see how we get on with making these videos, and if I have any more insights. I'd like to get a few things in order, a few sources together to maybe unravel the next little thing in a bit more detail. So for now, thanks for listening.